I just know you're ready to hear about a little crime. Welcome to Crime Daddies.
And welcome everybody to the first episode of our podcast, and thank you all for being here with us today and listening along. We are your Crime Daddies. I am Jacob.
And I am Hunter. Just like Jacob said, we are so excited to have you all as listeners here with us. I actually had a follower on TikTok reach out to me, and her name is Angela Campbell, and she said that we were dropping our first episode on her birthday. So, Angela, if you're listening to this, happy birthday.
Happy freaking birthday, and we're glad you're going to spend your birthday with your Crime Daddies.
And today, our first case is actually going to be taking place in a little tiny town in southeast Missouri called Tallapoosa. And to say Tallapoosa just kind of sounds different because Tallapoosa, in my opinion, is kind of an odd name in general. But like I said, this is a tiny town in southeast Missouri. It's located in the Boot Hill. And the reason that this region of Missouri is called the Boot Hill is because if you're looking at the U.S. map, particularly at the state of Missouri, then the bottom right-hand corner, this region looks like the heel of a boot. Tallapoosa is located in New Madrid County, and there's actually been a couple of famous people come out of New Madrid County. One of those being Jadis Jones, who is a 6'5" forward, and he was named the 2023 through 2024 Gatorade Missouri Boys Basketball Player of the Year, and he won 2 Class III state championships. He later signed to play for Lindenwood University, which is a Division I school, and let's just be honest, if you're playing D1, any kind of sport in D1 in college, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's like big time for something around here.
And another famous person from New Madrid County and even Tallapoosa itself is singer-songwriter Jerry Foster. He is the most prominent famous person in Tallapoosa, Missouri. He was born November 19th, 1935, and he became a successful songwriter in Nashville, Tennessee, collaborating with artists like Jeannie C. Riley or Jeannie C. Riley. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce her name. I've never heard of her. He also collaborated with Charley Pride and Mel Tillis. And I have heard of Charley Pride, but I have not heard of Mel Tillis. So if you guys have heard of these people, please let us know.
Yeah, because I've not heard of any of them, honestly.
So the population of Tallapoosa is approximately 78 people. It's a 0.45 square mile town, and it holds 46 households with 24 families. And this was recorded in 2020. The median age of Tallapoosa is 45.4 years of age. The median household income here is about $47,000 a year, which honestly is way below the national average. But honestly, Southeast Missouri is well below the national average on pay.
Yeah, it's one of the poorest regions of the whole country. So, I mean, that's kind of on average for this area, not compared to the rest of the country, but for this area, that's pretty normal.
Yeah, I mean, we think we're poor, but then you go to Mississippi and we realize we're able to buy a 12-pack of ramen instead of a 6-pack of ramen.
Exactly. Context really matters.
The median home cost here is $37,500, which honestly in today's economy is an absolute bargain. So I'm not sure the quality of the house you can get for $37,500, but you should be able to afford that. So Tallapoosa was also laid out and founded in 1902. If you're looking for something to do in Tallapoosa, unfortunately, you're probably just going to be sitting at home bored. Thankfully, Sykes, Missouri is not too far away from Tallapoosa, and it's probably the only town nearby with something to do. In all honesty, the only thing to do in Sykes, Missouri is either shop at a rundown, outdated clothing store. You can shop at Walmart, Harbor Freight, or Ollie's. Or you can fine dine at Colton's Steakhouse or Watami. And I actually love Watami.
I like Watami too. Whenever I'm wanting to do a fancy dinner for me and the old lady, Watami it is.
Oh yeah, I love sitting around and they got the flames going on the grill and you got the guy getting out the little squirter bottle saying, "Sake, sake, sake."
Yeah, and he just shoots me in the mouth. I'm a sucker for it.
I think he shot you in the face.
Yeah, you think so?
All right, so the main event every year held in the Boot Hill is held in Sikeston, Missouri, and that is the Sikeston J.C. Boot Hill Rodeo. This is where you have professional rodeo people come every year. You're going to see bull riding, bullfighting, calf roping, steer fighting, or steer wrestling. You're going to get it all here. They also every year have some notable artists come to perform. I think last year they had Big X the Plug, and he put on one heck of a show.
I didn't end up going, but I heard it was a pretty good concert.
Yeah, I've seen plenty of TikToks and videos on it.
I remember I went and watched Nelly at the rodeo back in like 2020. And so once they realized that people around Southeast Missouri do like a little bit of rap music, they've had a rap artist every year.
Yeah, did they have Ludacris perform there?
Yeah, they had Ludacris. They had
Yin Yang Twins.
Yeah, Yin Yang Twins. They had Ja Rule.
Yeah, so, I mean, they're not the biggest rap stars, but at one point they were. So it's pretty cool that they've been able to perform for us.
A little outdated,
Southeast
but
Missouri.
you just got to get the people that you understand the people that were going to go watch it. That's what they were listening to before. And then they get Big X to plug, who's like newer. Now you're getting younger guys in there to go watch those concerts. And I think this next coming year, they're going to have the Mexican OT.
I would definitely go watch the Mexican OT.
Me too. And he does rodeos. Fun fact.
Did you see that video of him? He was trying to do some bullfighting the other day, and he actually got hit by the bull and flipped around backwards, upside down through.
Yeah, he did a full flip. It was hilarious.
Oh, he's crazy.
Imagine he does that in Sykeston.
I'm pretty jealous of his Jerry curl mullet.
Me too. I can't get that.
All right. Enough about the rodeo. That's not why y'all's here. Y'all's here for some crime. So we're going to talk about December of 1996. And there's a lady here, and this lady's name is Shirley Niswonger. And Niswonger is spelled Niswonger. So I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but by the spelling, I believe I'm pronouncing it right. But I'm not sure if this lady has like a German or a Russian background. But I've never heard of Niswonger before. Now, Shirley Niswonger, she's about 37 in this time period in the 90s, and she's gone out with a guy for about 3 years as of now, and his name is Cecil Barriner. Now, these two are a wacky couple. I just want you to sit back and think about Cops back in the 90s. Remember that old show Cops from the 90s?
Oh, yeah.
Think about, you're watching Cops, and there's this couple out front fighting in front of the trailer park, and, they're under the influence, and they're causing a big scene. That is this couple. Like, that is this toxic couple. Now, Cecil, he's a couple years younger than Shirley. He was actually born in 1962, so he's about 34 in 1996. Shirley also has a son and a daughter. She has a 19-year-old daughter, and her name is Candace Sisk, and she goes by Candy. And during this time period in 1996, she is 19 years old. Shirley also has a mother, and her mother's name is Irene Sisk, and she is 74 years old during this time in 1996. Now, earlier that year in April, Shirley's dad had just passed away, and his name was Obi Sisk. And that's very unfortunate because, you're losing the backbone of the family, in my opinion, which is the husband and the father. So towards the end of 1996, Shirley ultimately breaks up with her boyfriend, Cecil. To give you guys a little backstory on Cecil and Shirley, they used to constantly borrow money from Shirley's mom and dad. And she's a mess right now at this point in her life. She's addicted to drugs and doesn't really have a whole lot going for her.
Probably wasn't much borrowing, more as just asking for it and never giving it back.
I'm sure. So Cecil and Shirley at least a few times went to Irene and Obi's house to borrow money. But Cecil always waited out in the car because they didn't like him. And to be fair, would you like your daughter's boyfriend who contributes to your daughter's drug habit?
No, I definitely wouldn't. As a girl dad, I think I would not only disapprove of it, but I think it'd get me pretty fired up, just to say the least.
And also, here's the thing. What man is willing to borrow money from your girlfriend's parents just to go get high? Like, I feel like I would have more pride than that, but also I've never been addicted to drugs. However, I'm not just speaking down on people that are in addiction because I've had people in my family that have suffered addiction. So I've seen it firsthand. I've seen how it changes people. And if you've ever seen anybody overcome addiction, it is a great thing because personally, I've watched my dad go from a dark place to being the light of a room because he overcame the addiction. And I'm very proud of him for that.
Yeah, and it's definitely, it can happen. But whenever they're on it, they make questionable decisions.
Absolutely. When they're on it, you almost hate them. That sounds bad, but like you still love them to death. But when they're on it, it's like it disgusts you because you know how they can actually be as a person.
You hate that version of them because you know the other side.
So if you hear me cracking jokes about people that are on drugs, I feel like I have the right to because I have firsthand seen the before drug use, the during drug use, and after drug use.
Yeah, so I think we have that perspective. It's a little bit more relatable, so just bear with us if you think our jokes get a little too dark.
So anyways, Shirley's parents look at Cecil as a no good, shady character, which honestly I would too.
Yeah, sounds like it.
He also it doesn't help that Cecil looks like a scumbag.
Yeah, I saw a picture before you gave me this case. Like I haven't looked into it, but I went to see what he looked like, and he looks like a scary individual.
So since Shirley's parents was always willing to give him and Shirley money, Cecil thinks that they have money. So let's go over a little bit here. They get together in early 1993, and their crazy love bond forms very quickly, which will happen when you're getting arrested together and you have some sort of form of loyalty with one another. It's kind of like the theory of you can pick on your sibling, but nobody else can pick on your sibling. Yep. It's kind of like they can fight with each other, but if a cop tries to arrest them, hey, don't you dare arrest my old lady and touch her like that.
Yep, get your hands on my old lady. They get real fired up.
Cecil and Shirley here in 1993 are arrested at 5:14 p.m. on a Saturday on a suspicion of peace disturbance. So disturbing the peace at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday. That seems pretty early to be getting in trouble for that, which tells me they probably got the day started early partying.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm already setting the scene here. They're definitely that couple like I mentioned on the episode of Cops.
Yeah, they're that couple.
Cecil during this arrest was also booked on suspicion of domestic violence and assault as well. Both of them were arrested because they were fighting.
Shocker.
Then by August 9th, 1993, they're in a motel together, the Stadium Motel. This being in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, I can assure you this place was maybe a 2-star joint. Poplar Bluff goes by the gateway of the Ozarks, but it seems more like the gateway to opiate addiction.
Yeah, you ain't wrong with that one.
Both were arrested after officers served a search warrant at 4:45 in the morning in their hotel room. They get arrested on suspicion of possession of methamphetamine, and they're both booked. Both are held of $25,000 bond because obviously they don't have that. So I'm not sure if the cops are trying to keep them there for other charges to come up along the way, but they don't have the $25,000. According to the records, they serve a search warrant on the motel room and found a 1/4 gram of meth. Now let's be honest, I don't think a raid at 4:45 in the morning was worth a 1/4 gram of meth and some drug paraphernalia. That sounds like it was for sure for self-use, that sounds like it was for sure for self-use and not distributing. So I can't believe that we wasted tax dollars on a hotel raid to get several officers involved over a 1/4 gram of meth.
Yeah, because I don't know what the street value of a 1/4 gram of meth, but I guarantee is not as much as the man hours it took to have a police raid a hotel room.
No, and I mean, listen, I don't know how much meth you can smoke in a time period, but even if they had 1 gram and they smoked it all that night, I don't know. I just don't feel like that was worth it.
I don't really think it was either.
There's for sure bigger players out there that they could have raided.
Yeah, and you know them. I mean, in Southeast Missouri, you know who the big players are.
So, November 1993, they are sentenced for this, and they are each placed on 5 years probation. So let's talk about probation for a minute. If you're put on probation, you're basically put in a trap because if you mess up during that probation period, where are you going to go? Straight back to jail.
Exactly, right back to it.
They plead guilty to this for possession of meth, and Cecil is sentenced to 3 years in prison, but it's suspended, and he has to do 300 hours of community service and be subject to 60-day shock detention. Now, I'm not sure what the 60-day shock detention exactly is. The only thing I can think of is kind of like a halfway house after jail for people recovering that were addicts.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it was. I kind of want to look it up.
I'm pretty sure my dad was in a halfway house, but I'm not sure if that's back in the 90s. It was called a shock detention. Like today, it's called a halfway house.
So it says right here, shock detention, or sometimes called shock incarceration, is short-term, highly regimented, military-style program for offenders, often non-violent first-time offenders, designed to discipline them instead of rehabbing them.
Okay, so this being in the 90s, that does make more sense because in the 90s, if your kids were acting up, you'd say, I'm going to send you to military school. Or if you got in trouble as a teenager, they would say, you can either go to jail or join the military.
Yep, it was big time back then.
So Shirley receives suspended and position of sentencing as well. Her probation includes 250 hours of community service and to pay crime victims fund. It's not ever clear how much she had to pay, but I would assume it's at least $100. So July 21st, 1994, Shirley is arrested and booked into jail on a warrant for bad checks. So not only is she strung out on drugs at this point, but she's also out writing bad checks, which is extremely stupid because that paper trail is traced.
Yeah, easily. You can't get away from that. Your name is on the damn check.
Not only that, but like, I don't know if Walmart had cameras back in the 90s, or I'm sure banks had cameras back in the 90s. But like, if they go back to see when that check was processed and they can see the person who wrote the check, it's like giving yourself away.
Yeah, easily.
So everything she's doing at this point is definitely meth-minded. August 23rd, 1994, Cecil and Shirley are arrested. The two of them are arrested together at the 800 block of South C Street following an incident at the Iron Horse Saloon. I think that the Iron Horse Saloon was in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, but it is no longer there. But it's kind of surprising that there is a place called Iron Horse Saloon because I've never heard of any hardcore biker gang out of Southeast Missouri.
Because it sounds kind of badass with that name, but I guarantee it wasn't.
So these two and a guy named Terry Chaney are all arrested together. Chaney was arrested on municipal warrants and suspicion of foray and peace disturbance, so fighting. Shirley and Cecil are also arrested on the exact same charges. So I'm not sure if, Chaney and Cecil was beating up on Shirley or if Shirley was beating up on Terry and Chaney, but either way, they're all arrested for fighting. So it's kind of like a threesome of fighting.
It is a crazy threesome, dude.
Well, I don't know. You never know. Shirley may have been coming on to Terry Chaney and, Cecil got upset about it, but it's not clear what happened.
They were just messing around.
Yeah, they were definitely messing around. So December 1995, and Cecil was arrested for violating probation. He was responsible for a burglary that occurred on August 7th, 1995. He also admitted to association with a known felon and admitted to using and possessing drugs. So at this point, our boy Cecil was totally screwed.
Well, I'm not sure, because sometimes you might get a nice probation officer who's a little nice to you, right?
Yeah, I guess that's true, but I mean, he just seems like he's a screw-up after screw-up after screw-up. Also, at some point, he was arrested for murder, but nothing ever came of it. He was released with no charges. I'm not sure if they lacked evidence or found a different suspect, but either way, he beat a murder charge.
Yeah.
So fall of 1996, Shirley breaks up with Cecil, and at this point, she's had enough. The one fight that caused her to break up with him was the fact that during a fight, he threatened to, quote, take her son out in the woods and shoot him. And I'm going to be honest, if someone threatens to shoot my boys, because I got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, it would be more than a breakup that would be going on.
Yep, then that's all you got to leave it at that.
So Shirley ends up going back to jail right after that. She's going to spend Christmas of 1996 in jail, which is kind of sad. That would suck to be in jail during Christmas.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about Candy, which is Shirley's daughter, remember? At this point, she is moved in with Irene, which is Shirley's mom, to try and help Irene out a little bit, since her husband, Obi, and Shirley's dad and Candy's grandpa had just died back in April of 1996. And I'm sure at this point, Irene was very lonely, and I'm sure that she loved the thought of her granddaughter Candy moving in with her because, there's nothing grandparents love more than having their grandkids around.
Yeah, there was one point my grandma had probably 8 or 9 of us living in her house. And I remember it was just good for all of us. We liked being close to grandma, and grandma liked being close to us. We helped her out, and she helped us out.
Oh, absolutely. Me and my cousins used to spend so much time at my grandma and grandpa's house. They're both still alive, thank God, but I'm sure we drove them absolute crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So Candy, at this point, is living with Irene, and everything seems to be going well at this time. However, December 1996, Cecil thinks he failed a P test. Remember, our boy Cecil here is on probation, so he is concerned his probation will be revoked. Now, he lives in Poplar Bluff, and he wants to flee the area to get away from his probation violation, which, why would you go on the run from the law over a probation violation to begin with? That's so stupid.
Yeah, you're going to risk the rest of your life by not just owning up to your probation violation, and you might get, a few months, maybe a year.
So Cecil, obviously on meth and not really thinking clearly, he comes up with a plan. His plan was to go to Candy and Irene's house and try to get money from them. Because remember, Cecil thinks that Irene is loaded with money. Now, I'm sure Irene was doing well for herself, but why would you give your money to your daughter's ex-meth out boyfriend? Jacob, if this was your daughter, would you give her ex-boyfriend money?
I would not. I
honestly would probably chase him out of my property with a firearm.
Yeah, just to put it lightly, that's probably...
But I also doubt that Irene has enough money to let Cecil evade law enforcement forever. But see, Jacob, here's the crazy part. How much do you think Cecil thinks it's going to take to evade law enforcement forever?
I don't know. He's probably not thinking very clear. He probably thinks that he can probably get by with a couple $100.
Well, it's going to be more than that. Cecil thinks $1,000 is going to be able to evade law enforcement for the rest of his life. How stupid. $1,000? $1,000 is nothing.
No, drop in the bucket.
The only thing he could do with $1,000 to evade law enforcement is to get a one-way plane ticket to Mexico and never come back, or any other country for that fact. So December 16th, 1996 at 8:45 a.m., Shirley is in jail. Candy and Irene are living together. So Candy this morning calls her Aunt Debbie up, who is Shirley's sister and Irene's daughter. Debbie DuBois is her name. Candy was on the phone with Debbie and said that a man had came over to the house a little while ago. Candy said the man was talking to Irene in the front, and Candy didn't see the man, but she heard that the man was talking to her grandmother, which is Irene. She said that the man was saying that he had a Christmas gift for Candy from her mother in jail, which, what can
I'm
you...
about to say, what are you getting from jail?
Maybe a letter, but if it was a letter, she would have just mailed it. I mean, 12-pack of ramen. I mean, you don't have a lot of money when you're in jail.
A lot of anything when you're in jail.
But Candy did notice that the man was driving a white Ford Taurus, and I bet the whole situation just seemed strange. Just imagine your mom's in jail and a meth head shows up and is claiming to have a Christmas gift for you from your mom that's in jail. So Candy told her aunt that Irene said the man had acted strangely and that the man had been in Tallapoosa the day before asking directions to their house. Now, everybody, I'm just going to say, sometimes in life, let's just mind our own business. If some tweaker comes up to you asking directions to a sweet young lady in a sweet elder lady's house, do not give that tweaker the directions, because nothing good can come out of it.
Matter of fact, give them the wrong directions. Point them to the direction of the police office. And then once they get there, maybe they're going to realize, maybe I should rethink what I'm doing.
Point them in the directions to the nearest rehab facility.
Yeah.
So while still on the phone, Debbie told Candy to call back if the man shows back up. Debbie can't really do much because she works at the elementary school and can't just leave. So Debbie then tried to call a male relative to check on Irene and Candy, but was unable to get a hold of him, which is very sad because if she was able to get that male relative to go check on them, this case could have had a completely different story.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know where this goes, but I can only imagine, right?
So about several minutes after 9 a.m. that morning, so this is about 15 minutes after the first phone call, a bank teller at a bank in nearby Risco, Missouri, attended to a man driving a white Ford Taurus. Remember, everybody, Candy mentioned a white Ford Taurus. The teller saw Candy riding in the passenger seat dressed in a nightgown, and she was also wrapped in a blanket, which is for sure a red flag because that's not really banking attire. And I'm sure from a picture I've seen of Candy, she looked like a very beautiful young lady.
Yeah.
And she looked like she probably cared about her image. So I couldn't imagine her leaving the house, especially back in the 90s when everybody really cared about their image. I couldn't imagine her leaving the house in a nightgown wrapped in a blanket.
Well, she's nursing an injury, right? I couldn't imagine her leaving the house at all, right? I wouldn't want to leave. Oh, you didn't. Dang it. All right.
Candy actually had just had surgery to have a disc in her back removed, so she's actually not supposed to be going anywhere for about 6 weeks.
Yeah, so I mean, I figured if you just got injured, you don't want to go outside anyway, especially go to the bank. I mean, if I had a disc in my back injured, I'm going to milk that injury and I'm just going to take my time, let it heal. Because if you don't let it heal, that's the kind of thing that's just going to bug you for the rest of your life.
But yeah, if I just had a back surgery, I'm not sitting in an uncomfortable Ford Taurus.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I had a Ford Taurus. They're reliable as I'll get out. The comfort, that's another story.
So the driver gives the teller a check in the amount of $1,000 to the man signed by Candy and to be drawn from her account. After having Candy sign the cash receipt, the teller gives the man $1,000 in cash, 9 $100 bills and 5 $20 bills as the man requested. So about 10:45 that morning, Debbie DuBois tries to call back, which is Candy's aunt. She calls at least twice and nobody answers. The phone just rings and rings. So Debbie was concerned because one telephone should have had an answering machine, but it never connected her to the answering machine to leave a message.
That's weird.
So let's remember, Candy had So Debbie knows that Candy had just had surgery 4 days ago, and she knew that Candy shouldn't be going out. She knew that she should be at home resting. So Debbie leaves school and she drives over to the house, and when she enters, she said she entered through the carport and into the kitchen. And disclaimer, everybody, I'm about to describe a very disgusting and chaotic crime scene that I couldn't imagine.
I don't even want to hear about it, but I know I got to.
So buckle up.
I will.
So after she entered the door through the carport, she saw light coming from Candy's bedroom, and she followed the light. Entering the room, she seen Candy's body on the bed in her bedroom. Her hands were bound in front of her with rope. She was unclothed below the waist. A pair of sweatpants and a pair of underwear were on the floor nearby. Her neck had been slashed 6 to 8 times, and there was also a knife protruding from her chest. An autopsy revealed that Candy bled to death from the neck slashes and that the knife that was thrust into her chest didn't even matter because she had already died before that happened. There's also several bite marks that were left on her left breast, which is disgusting because not only are you sitting here stabbing this woman to death and killing her, but you have some sort of sexual desire to bite on that poor young lady's breast. I mean, what a
Sick.
sicko.
That is disgusting. I'm already tired of hearing this. I know there's more, but it just it gets my blood boiling.
Oh, it gets worse. It gets worse.
I know.
You ready to hear how bad it gets?
Not really, but I'm sure you're going to tell me.
They also found that she had been anally violated with a
God.
blunt object at the time of her death, resulting in lacerations to her rectum and vagina.
Jesus Christ.
So, what a sicko.
Yeah.
Like, if he did it before she's dead, or whether he did it after she was dead,
Regardless.
a blunt object to what he was doing with it to her body. Ugh.
Yeah.
All right. So Debbie then leaves and she goes to Irene's bedroom. She found Irene's body on the floor of the bedroom next to the bed. She had been hogtied, her wrists and ankles bound together with the same length of rope that was found on Candy's body. An autopsy revealed that 17 superficial stab wounds were localized in the area of her left chest, 5 of which penetrated the chest cavity and lung and were inflicted 15 to 45 minutes before she died. 3 deep slashes to her throat caused her death. So, essentially, in this autopsy, it shows that Irene sat there and suffered for 45 minutes before she died.
That is sad. That is so sad. 45 minutes of just not knowing, of hoping and probably praying and thinking, and you don't know if the guy's still in the house. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't imagine being in that position.
And just think, this is her niece and her mom, and she walked into this horrific scene. I mean, this is stuff that comes out of horror movies, and this happened to her own family. So I don't know how she didn't just pass out or throw her up, but...
Man, I don't know how I haven't heard of this case before.
You know, I don't know either. So Debbie said that the first thing she did was run into the living room to look for the phone, but she couldn't find the phone. She said normally the phone is sitting in one place, and... let's remember, back in the 90s, that's true, because if you went to your grandma's house, I'm sure the phone was always in one place. So she then went to the kitchen to see if that phone was there, and it was also gone. So at this point, she runs out of the carport and notices blood on the inside of the door as she does that. She said she didn't notice it on the way in because she wasn't paying attention, and I believe her because she's probably already in so much of a panic and nervousness walking in, not knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine how it would feel to be in that position. And, I mean, you're seeing people you love and cherish. I know I wouldn't act in any way that's better. I'm sure I would do some things that would probably be looked at by the outside as ignorant. But, I mean, you can't really predict how you're going to act in those scenarios.
At this point, Debbie said she just had to be with someone. So she drove to a nearby store where her brother worked and told him what happened. And they called the cops. Which I'm sure that her brother called the cops because I'm sure that Debbie was a complete mess. I mean, and if she was, I don't blame her. I don't know what I would do.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough.
So I'll say something. I kind of relate with Debbie because I'll give you a little story about my life. When I was 8 years old, my oldest brother, who was 21 years old at the time, actually got stabbed up real bad.
Oh, my Lord.
And this happened in Essex, Missouri back in 2003. I'm not going to go into a bunch of details about it, but he got stabbed up real bad. And I remember as 8 years old, the phone kept ringing in the middle of the night, and I finally answered it. And somebody on the other end of the phone asked to speak to my mom, and I gave my mom the phone, and her face just turned white. And I remember rushing over to the Sikeston, Missouri ER and seeing my brother laid up in a hospital bed with blood all over him. And he lived through it, but it was a very traumatic scenario for me.
Sure.
And it was a lesson taught to me at that point of no matter what happens, try to protect yourself no matter what it takes.
Exactly. That is, I mean, I couldn't imagine seeing something like that. Traumatic is like the easiest way to put it.
So, needless to say, I love true crime, but when it comes to horrific crimes about people getting stabbed, it kind of irks me a little bit because I do relate so much to like crime like that happening.
Yeah, and you got to think whenever someone's stabbed as opposed to anything else, that's more intimate. I mean, that's more deliberate, I'd say. It's easy to stand behind the trigger of a gun, but whenever you're stabbing into somebody, and I hate to get too gruesome, that's far more evil.
So like I said, Debbie went to her brother and they called the police. And when the police arrived, they find the purses of Candy and Irene on the floor near the bodies. Each had been open. There were 2 checkbooks lying near Irene's purse. One of the checkbooks was a check for $1,000. that had been made out to cash but not signed. There was also a TV and VCR that were missing from Candy's bedroom. They also found an empty box for the videotape of Independence Day, which had just came out. And I'm sure that Candy had got this, to watch while she was recovering.
Yeah, I mean, if this happened in 1996, right?
Yes.
So that's a brand new movie at that point.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sure she was just ready to be laid up, healing, and watching a brand new movie that was like the blockbuster of the year.
So multiple telephones in different areas of the house were either disabled or just missing. A utensil drawer in a kitchen of the residence was also smeared with Irene's blood. So somebody must have touched it. Now, I'm not sure if the killer touched it or if Irene had touched it, maybe trying to get something to protect herself. It's never really clear on the research I've done, but either way, her blood was found on the utensil drawer in the kitchen.
I'd like to think that maybe she had the opportunity to help herself, but I don't also want to speculate on things I don't know. But like I said, it'd be nice to think that maybe she had done something to help herself.
So let's talk about what Cecil was doing the night before the murder.
I don't want to talk about this douchebag.
Well, we have to.
We have to, Jacob.
We got to tell the story, Jacob.
I'm tired of this story, man. It's getting rough.
So on December 15th, the night before the murder, Cecil apparently was visiting with Daniel and Samantha Simmons. They were friends of him who lived a few miles from the Sisk residence. Cecil told Samantha Simmons he was going to Tallapoosa to collect some money and drove away in his white Ford Taurus. He returned shortly after and said no one was home. And then Daniel and Samantha Simmons accompanied him to Tallapoosa in a Taurus. He then drove by the Sisk house 3 times. And let's be honest, if you're driving by someone's house 3 times, it's kind of borderline stalking.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably where the line is at 3 times. Like, once you push over 3, you're kind of weird. Maybe 2 or 3 times, you're just curious. But that, like you said, you're right on the line of stalking.
So during the drive, he told her, quote, "That girl is going to pay him some money," is what Cecil apparently said, and pointed to a note he left on the door. Now, Samantha noticed during the drive that Cecil had held in his hand and played with a purple Crown Royal bag. So there is this purple Crown Royal bag, and it contained something in it. She could tell, but she couldn't tell what was in it because Cecil never opened it. So it never says what was in the bag, but it's just something Samantha had mentioned when she was questioned.
Sure.
So after Cecil had committed the murders, So that day we'll find out, the day of the murders here, Cecil checked into a motel in Poplar Bluff sometime after the murders. He paid for the room in cash and told the clerk he wanted to be left alone. Later that afternoon, he visited Kevin Dennis and gave him a VCR there, and he also changed clothes while at his house. On December 18th, 2 days after the bodies of Irene and Candy were discovered, Lieutenant Stephen Hensley of the Missouri State Highway Patrol and Deputy Sheriff Scott Johnson of Butler County contacted Cecil at his brother's home. Cecil agreed to accompany the officers to troop headquarters on Poplar Bluff to discuss the homicide. Cecil denied knowing that the Sisk had even been murdered and denied killing them.
Of course he did. What a douchebag.
And let's just be honest, it's no surprise that Cecil is automatically like the prime suspect because, and I'm not sure why it's never mentioned in this case of research I've done, but like Candy had to have known Cecil because he was dating her mother.
Yeah, for 3 years at this point, right? So she's 19. Her mom's been dating this guy ever since she was 16 years old. So, I mean, she had to have known him. There's no way for 3 years you never come in contact with your mom's boyfriend.
So Cecil told Hensley that he'd been to the house only once before, and he said the only time he'd been there before, he sat in the car while Shirley went inside to get money or to borrow money from Shirley's parents. Then Cecil had told them that he'd spent the whole evening, Sunday evening, in room 219 at the Tower Motel in Poplar Bluff with some chick that he only knew as Debbie. Just kind of ironic that he was doing stuff with another girl named Debbie when there was Aunt Debbie that was also involved in the case.
Yeah, there's too many Debbies.
My favorite Debbie is the little Debbie.
I mean, she's my favorite too. She's never let me down one bit. I mean, I'm sure you could tell.
Yeah, that's what made me get fat.
Yeah, I mean, that's whenever it was like 2008 and my dad went to prison and my grandma passed away, I got real chubby off Little Debbie cakes. I ate myself into a hole.
There's nothing better than sitting in a deer stand on a cold November morning and just smashing a box of Little Debbie Christmas trees.
Or fishing with my grandpa and he has his just straight black coffee that tastes like dirt And then he gives you a pack of these Little Debbie donut sticks to just dip inside of it. Man, that was like nostalgic.
All right. So anyway, on the day before the murders, he said he borrowed his mother's white Ford Taurus. It's up. How many times has a white Ford Taurus been brought up in this case?
I mean, it's getting pretty clear.
He said he borrowed his mother's white Ford Taurus at 8 a.m. to drive to another town to go Christmas shopping. He said he drove toward Fisk to see another girl, but when he got there, she was already with another man. So, like, I guess Cecil is kind of got a bunch of side pieces all around Southeast Missouri. I don't see how, because this dude looks like a total tweaker. We're going to post pictures of Cecil in this case, and I don't see how this guy has all these side pieces, but apparently he does.
Imagine being so much of a bum that you're borrowing your mother's car for a booty call that cancels on you. Like, dude, pack it up and go home. At that point, you're trying to get into something and you don't even have your own vehicle to get there. You got to call up mom and say, hey, mom, I need a car. What do you tell your mom in that instance?
So Cecil said since, I guess, his side piece is already busy with another man, he then drove to Cape Girardeau and also to Dexter, Missouri, so that he could do some Christmas shopping.
Hey, that's where we are.
Yep, Dexter, Missouri. He said after that, he returned to Poplar Bluff to get his brother to go to continue Christmas shopping, and then they drove to another town and returned by noon. Now, the sheriff or the lieutenant writing all of this down and whatnot said, Now the sheriff or the lieutenant that was writing all of this down straight up told Cecil that was physically impossible. You couldn't do all that in that amount of time. You need like 2 more hours. So Cecil said, all right, fine. Look, I didn't want to admit what I was really doing, but I'm on probation, and I shouldn't be telling you this, but he said, I didn't want to admit that I was actually buying and using drugs that Monday morning.
I'm sure he was.
I'm sure he was. I bet that is probably the only truth in this entire interrogation he tells. And he said that's going to violate my probation, so that's why he said he didn't want to disclose what he was actually doing. He also said he visited a man from Poplar Bluff named Kevin Dennis, and he said he bought $25 worth of meth from him. He also said he'd hung some sheetrock for Dennis that afternoon.
I wonder how much meth you can get for that amount of money. Now, I'm not going to go out and search for it. I'm not going to ask nobody. I'm just a curious guy.
I'm sure in 96 you could buy more meth for $25 than you can today, but I don't know.
Dang inflation.
So later, police talked to Kevin Dennis, and he said Cecil did come over, but he came over to his house at 6 or 6:30 p.m., and that he only stayed for 10 minutes. He also said that he had hung one piece of sheetrock a month earlier, so Cecil completely lied about that entire situation other than being there and buying meth.
Like you said, I think the buying the meth thing is the only thing he's telling the truth about.
So they then end the interview because they know they're not really getting anywhere with Cecil. So they interview Cecil the next day, and they tell him that they found a lot more out over the past 24 hours. They said that they didn't even want to know that. They said, you don't have to admit that you even did it. Now we know everything. They said, I just want to know why, not who or what or when. Why did you do it, Cecil? And Cecil said that I want to tell the truth, but I can't. Cecil said, I just want to talk to my brother. I just want to talk to my brother. So Cecil lives with his brother. He's teetering on the edge. He said, please, just let me talk to my brother. And then the cops were sitting there talking to each other. They said, he never even asked to talk to a lawyer. He just wanted to talk to his brother. So the cops tell Cecil, all right, you can talk to your brother. So they let Cecil talk to his brother, and at this point, there were other cops executing a search warrant in Cecil's room at his brother's house. So they bring the brother in, and they tell Cecil's brother that Cecil wanted to talk to him, and his brother said okay. So Cecil and his brother talked alone for a few minutes, and then his brother left. And then once the cops came back in, Cecil just blurted out, quote, I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't mean to kill him. Cecil told them that he went to the Sisk house because he believed that he had flunked a recent urine test and he wanted to get out of there before he got sent to jail. He said he got to the Sisk residence and said that Candy and Irene argued about giving him money. Irene started to write a check and stopped. And then Candy wrote one for $1,000, and Cecil drove them to the bank to cash it. Now, I'm sure that Irene didn't want to give him money anymore because she'd probably already gave Shirley and him so much money, and I'm sure Candy was just willing to give him money because she probably knew that Cecil was a terrible guy and just wanted to get him out of their home. Like, Candy probably just didn't want this scumbag anywhere around them.
Yeah, I'm sure she saw the writing on the wall and just didn't want him to be near them anymore. But I mean, it's just, she's hurt and she's living with her frail old grandma. You don't want any problems whenever you're dealing with that kind of stuff. You just want to do anything it takes to keep the peace. And so I'm sure she was willing to help just for the fact he'd get out of the house.
So Cecil said that he drove Irene and Candy to the bank to cash the check. Back at the house, he said that he intended to just tie them up and give them some time to get out of town. But as he started to drive away, he saw Irene looking at him through the kitchen window. And for some reason, Cecil got scared by this. I mean, I'm sure that Irene was looking at him to make sure that he was gone because obviously she didn't want this total asshole around anymore. So Cecil said he re-entered the house. He said he tied a rope from Irene's hands and bound her feet. He hog-tied Irene. Could you imagine hog-tying a 74-year-old woman?
Well, why would you need to hog-tie her? Is it not enough just to tie her hands up? She's a 74-year-old woman. She's not a hog. She's not a grown man. She doesn't need to be tied up like she's a threat. I'm sorry, but if you're, what's this guy, in his 30s or 40s, definitely has the ability to overpower her, you don't need to freaking hog-tie her.
Here's the thing, though. Cecil better be lucky that neither one of these women had a gun. Because if either one of them would have had a gun, I think that this could have been a different story.
Stay strapped.
He then said he saw that Irene started to reach under the bed covers. And the detectives asked, well, what was she reaching for? And Cecil said, a knife. For some reason, Cecil was trying to put blame on Irene trying to reach for a knife, which I highly doubt that a 74-year-old woman had a knife underneath her pillow.
Yeah, what woman sleeps with a knife underneath their pillow?
He then said that both Irene and Candace were screaming out of control. So Hensley said, well, what did you do, Cecil? And Cecil said, I shut them up. Cecil said he wore gloves when he went to the residence so that his fingerprints wouldn't be found by the cops, which I'm surprised that he even thought of that. He also said that after he'd left their house, he threw from the window of his car a camouflage jacket that he'd been wearing because it had blood on it. And he said he threw it out either on Highway J or Highway 53, but he wasn't positive. He said that he then checked into the Tower Motel and he returned to Poplar Bluff because he was afraid he was going to be followed because he's on meth and paranoid. So the detective said, well, why'd you rape the girl? Why'd you do that? Cecil said he didn't. He never sexually assaulted her at all. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, you won't find my semen anywhere around there. He said, I just confessed to 2 murders. Why would I lie about that?
So you're just a peach of a person because you didn't jizz everywhere? Because you didn't finish, dude? Whatever. Sorry, this guy he's a piece of work.
I mean, let's just be real. I'm sure, like I said, that Candy had already known Cecil. And Cecil obviously probably already knew Candy. And I'm sure that Candy probably knew that Cecil was kind of a scumbag. And Cecil had probably been keeping an eye out on her and checking her out when she was just a young teenager. And I'm sure that he probably always had this fantasy in his mind because he's just a very sick individual.
I mean, he's been around her since she was 16 years old, so I'm sure he had just kept the thought in the back of his head, and now he had the opportunity to put his plan into action, which is just disgusting.
So both of the officers look at each other, and then they look at Cecil, and they said, Cecil, you know what the ironic thing about this whole situation is? They told him that you probably wouldn't even have been sent back to jail for failing a piss test. You probably would have just talked your way out of it. After the interviews, the detectives asked Cecil if he wanted to make a videotaped confession, because at this point, nothing had been recorded or videoed. And Cecil said he wasn't up to it right now, but maybe the next day. He also said again that he didn't mean for this to happen and that he didn't mean to kill them. The lieutenant said, how can you say those words out loud, dude? What was done to them is way over the bounds. It was so on purpose, way out of bounds. It's not like you hit her with your car and they were on the side of the road. That could be an accident. This is really focused. This is like drop kicking a basketball into the second level and saying I was aiming at the hoop.
Yeah, this was premeditated. There was no way he just did this because he was scared they're going to tell on him for taking their money. If he thought to wear gloves, if he sexually assaulted, if he did what he did, he was going there for one purpose. There's no way he was only going there for money.
Yeah, I personally think that the money thing was just an excuse. I think that Candy was definitely the main reason he was there.
Yeah, I think he knew she was vulnerable. And again, I hate to speculate, but these are the facts. And so if I'm just gathering my thoughts from strictly based on the facts, she was hurt, he was a creep, and he came with essentially a kill kit, and I don't know, it points to the fact that this wasn't because he was scared and wanted money. It points to the fact that he was a very disturbed individual.
So the cops get a search warrant for Cecil's room in his brother's house. And Jacob, guess what they find in his bedroom?
The murder weapon.
Well, no. They find 32 ropes and cords. They find 32 ropes and cords in there. Tests established that 2 of the ropes were consistent in color and composition and construction with the ropes that had been used to bind Candy and Irene.
All right, guilty.
Yep, so far guilty. In the room's wastebasket, they find several handwritten notes. What do you think they said, Jacob?
I'm sure they had the plan.
Well, one of the notes contained directions from his house to the Cecil residence. The cops followed these directions and it led them right to Candy and Irene's house. So, guilty.
Guilty.
The second note had the name Candace on it. Guilty.
Guilty. He must have just had an infatuation with her.
The third note read, gun, handcuffs, 12 feet of rope, cut into 6-foot pieces, and it's pretty much just a murder kit, and he had to write it down because he's an idiot.
Yeah, that's a kill kit. I'm sorry, but you're not there for any money whenever you're bringing a gun, you're bringing rope that's cut into specific length pieces. Yeah, scratch that, dude. You're weird. You meant to do what you did.
Why would you write this down and throw it in a wastebasket? I'd at least try to burn the evidence. So here's the thing. They also find a red duffel bag with handcuffs, ropes, dildos, homemade sex
whoa. You said dildos?
Yes. Dildos, plural. Dildos.
My goodness. In his bag?
In a red duffel bag in his bedroom.
Good God.
There's also homemade sex tapes, a bondage magazine, a videotape of the movie Independence Day with no box. Wonder where the box is. Candy's bedroom. And they also find his wallet with $875. So if that's what's left over after the $1,000 that he cashed at the bank from the check Candy wrote him, that means he had spent $125. And let's remember, he went to the hotel and said he went Christmas shopping. So back in the 90s, I could see where that could total up to $125.
Yeah, easily.
So they seized the car, which is a white Ford Taurus, and they find traces of blood on the driver's armrest and door handle. They find traces of blood on the steering wheel and the trunk glass. And that's somebody else's car. Guess whose car that is, Jacob?
His mom.
That's right. That's his mom's car because he's a piece of crap and can't have his own car.
Douchebag.
The blood on the steering wheel was found to be human blood. The other ones were mixed with human and deer blood. The blood on the door handle was consistent with a mixture of a small amount of his DNA and a larger amount of Irene's DNA. So, being the blood on the door handle having a large amount of Irene's DNA and a small amount of his DNA tells me that he must have cut himself during the process of the stabbing he committed on Irene to mix the two bloods together.
Yeah, I'm sure there was some fighting back. I'd like to at least hope that they didn't just go down without a fight. You know, I hope that they gave this guy a run for his money and left him with some pain too.
So we're going to fast forward to the trial. And during the trial, his attorney argued that there's no audio or video recordings of his confession. So his attorney said it couldn't have happened because there's no evidence of recording or video confession. His attorney's just pretty well trying to say that his confession shouldn't matter because there's no real evidence other than what was written down.
Yeah, but it's also the 90s. I'm sure that wasn't the most common thing to do. And I'm sure now every single interaction a police officer has with a perp from the moment they meet them versus whenever they're in an interrogation room, all the way to court, everything's recorded. Everything is on file nowadays.
Yeah, you can go on YouTube and look at so many different interrogations nowadays.
Yeah, and back then, I'm sure it just wasn't practice. And I'm sure that detective that interrogated him after this case probably recorded every single one afterwards.
Oh, I'm sure. So they asked Hensley, which was the cop that did the interrogation, if it had ever been in his practice in 23 years to use recording devices during an interview. And he said no, only when a suspect wants to make an official statement. The criminologist testifies that a cotton rope with an orange nylon rope. The criminologist testifies that an orange nylon rope were part of the bindings that matched the ropes of the 32 ropes that were taken from his room. Guilty.
Guilty.
Another cop on the stand displays ropes taken from the victims. These were the actual ropes that were used as the crime, as well as many of the other ropes that were taken from his room.
Look, I'm not trying to make it seem like I wish this guy was smarter. I'm glad he was as stupid as he was, and he didn't get rid of all this evidence. But how stupid are you that you commit this crime and you think, maybe I should get rid of this jacket I was wearing, but I'll keep the rope, and I'll keep the plans in the trash can, and I'll keep all this other evidence. I'll keep the damn VHS tape in this duffel bag. Like, I'm glad he didn't think to get rid of these things because I'm sure this is what really secures the court's decision. but it's so idiotic, and it just tells you how messed up this guy was to not think about all those other possibilities.
They also showed a silver steak knife, which was the actual murder knife that had been stuck into Candy's chest. They passed it around the courtroom to the jurors, and the jurors were obviously horrified by it. I can't believe they did that, but I guess it's a shock value.
Yeah, I'm sure they just wanted to show them, kind of like whenever in the OJ trial, whenever they had the bloody gloves that were found at the crime scene, they just wanted to pass them around and say, "Oh, look at this."
They then passed around her bloodstained nightgown, and they were really freaked out by that, which I'm sure it was all cut up and had blood all over it. So, yeah, that would be hard to just look at.
Yeah.
And it's also found that the court is going to allow some sexual stuff into the case. And they did that to try and show that he likes a certain kind of binding during sexual activity. To show what he likes, they bring in Shirley because she knows exactly what Cecil likes. Shirley testified that he once told her that he would take her son into the woods and shoot him. And they did this so that they could show that Cecil is actually a dangerous man.
Yeah.
So they end up playing a videotape between Cecil and Shirley that they were engaged in various consensual acts of bondage. They did this so that they could show that the same type of knots he used on Shirley was also the same type of knots that they found on Irene and Candy.
Yeah, I'm sure it was just consistent evidence.
And here's the deal. I couldn't imagine testifying in court and then the entire courtroom seeing my sex tape.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for her because not only did your daughter get murdered by the guy you brought around her, but so did your mom. And you're already going through all that trauma. And now you're telling me everyone in this courtroom, 12 jurors, attorneys, the judge, anybody else that's in there, like your family members that are there to watch the trial are all watching your business. You have to be having the worst time because honestly, if someone were to look at it this way, it can be perceived as your fault. You know, you brought this guy around your family, you introduced him to your daughter and your mom, and now here you are at this murder trial because they're both dead. And now you are watching yourself getting, you know, your dirty business shown in front of everybody. My heart goes out to her because I'm sure she never thought this guy she was just doing meth with was going to turn into what it turned into.
Yeah, I'd be so embarrassed to somebody to have on video me being tied up off spread eagle.
Yeah, there ain't no way. That's why I keep those videos of myself locked deep away.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just joking.
Yeah. They also said that they found a bondage magazine in Cecil's red duffel bag. And they said this magazine is called Bondage Fantasies. And it depicts a cartoon of a particularly clothed woman bound to a tree with her hands tied and genitals exposed. The woman is held by one man while another man approaches her with his erection. So it's a weird rape scene in the woods. And I guess they showed this to kind of show, like, this is the stuff Cecil's into.
I get people have different kinks and there's different strokes for different folks, but I don't know. Some of it just takes it too far. And I feel like the people that subscribe to that kind of stuff should all be put on a registry.
And they also exposed it during the trial that Cecil's red duffel bag contained over 30 dildos. Think about that, Jacob. Over 30 dildos.
What do you need 30 for?
I don't know if they're all for self-use, but like over 30 dildos. I can't wrap my head around why somebody would need over 30 dildos.
Do you have one
Cecil
for
did.
30 women or 30 days of the month? Like, what is your deal? Are all 30 for you?
I don't know. So Cecil's attorney asserts that the omission of the dildos was prejudicial because the prosecutor referred to Cecil as a big dildo in the closing argument, which is hilarious that the prosecuting attorney referred to Cecil as a big dildo because he had so many dildos in his red duffel bag. I think that's awesome.
That's hilarious.
So the prosecutor also said, who tied knots similar to those found on the victims, Cecil Barriner, the defendant, who ties the same type of knots in bondage knots. Or wait, just delete all that. So the verdict comes in 4 hours of deliberation. He is found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. They have a confession, they have evidence, they have blood evidence, and they also have DNA. During the penalty phase, the state introduced his prior conviction for possessing controlled substances. At the close of evidence, instructions, and arguments by counsel in the penalty phase, the jury was unable to reach a verdict on punishment. It was 7 to 5 for the death penalty or life in prison. The murder was committed while he was engaged in another unlawful homicide, committed for the purpose of receiving money and other things of monetary value, involved in torture and depravity of mind, committed while the defendant was engaged in the perpetration of burglary, also the perpetration of robbery and kidnapping, and murdered these people because of their status as potential witnesses against him. Now, the appeal comes in and he says that you shouldn't have allowed the sex tapes to be played and all of my red duffel bag items in there. Cecil also says the evidence should be judged under general principles of relevance because tying a knot is not misconduct or wrongful act. Prosecutor also, the record reflects that there's no testimony anywhere in the trial from any witness regarding the type of knots or the manner in which they were tied because they didn't know. That's what he says. This admission of the dildos themselves was error. The state argues that the dildos did not constitute prior uncharged misconduct evidence. The state argues that the dildos did not constitute prior uncharged misconduct evidence and that the question of their admissibility should be decided under general principles. The state contends that the dildos were properly admitted to corroborate the guilt of the victim of Candace Siskin that was anally penetrated with an object at the time of her death. In the alternative, the state asserts that the dildos were properly admitted under the governing rules of admission of prior uncharged evidence. So the Missouri Supreme Court agreed that they shouldn't have admitted dildos into the case, and they reversed his conviction. They don't like the admission of dildos because they don't want all this dildo talk in their courtroom. The nephew of Irene, a family person here, said, I was really shocked that 5 of the judges stated that there should be a retrial. I think we should have the best, and I think we do have the best court system in the world, but the judges erred in this case, sending it back for a possible retrial. So in 2002, they had the retrial again, and they allow everything other than the dildo talk, and he is found again guilty of first-degree murder and death penalty.
Good.
They also have another retrial in the 2003 trial. Cecil argues that the court should not have excluded exculpatory evidence that hair found at the crime scene and tested by the state did not match hair samples taken from either of the victims. But that doesn't make sense because they found Irene's DNA blood evidence in his car.
Yeah, literally. And why else would he have her blood in his car?
Exactly. I don't understand why he's even arguing this. But at the end of the day, they find him guilty again of 2 counts of first-degree murder, and this time he is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
So no death penalty this time.
No death penalty, but sentenced to life without parole, which I'm not a big death penalty guy because there's been so many people that have been put to death that were later found innocent. But in a case like this, where this guy is obviously guilty and all the evidence is there, take him behind the barn and just shoot him because he's obviously guilty and he's obviously the one who did it.
Yeah, that's the problem, man, is you never know. And if it's not 100%, and you're not absolute on it, then I don't think it should be around. Like you said, I'm not a big death penalty guy because there's been innocent people that have been put to death. And so it's tricky. But I agree with you. I mean, whenever it's this cut and dry and you know it for sure, yeah, I mean, take them out back and give them old Yeller treatment.
But there is some good news at the end of this story.
Thank God. Give me something good.
According to the Missouri Department of Corrections, 62-year-old Cecil Barriner died sometime before 6 p.m. on Friday, September 20th at the Jefferson City Correctional Center. He had been an inmate in the Department of Corrections since May of 1999. The Missouri Department of Corrections did not release his cause of death, but said an autopsy will be performed. And as of today, no updates on the autopsy have been released.
So he's gone.
He's gone. He's dead.
Good. I mean, if there's anything good you can give me out of that, I'm glad that he's no longer alive, because Candy was 19 and wasn't able to continue her life. Irene, even though she was in her 70s, was not able to enjoy those last few years she might have had with her granddaughter and potential great-grandchildren. And so I don't think he deserved to live any longer than he did. So
no, absolutely not. And see, here's the thing. I mean, the reason that the death penalty is kind of a crappy scenario, in all honesty, it takes so many years of trials and appeals and everything else that's involved in it, that it costs the tax dollars way more money to do that, because court costs is so extremely high than it does for a prisoner to just sit in jail the rest of his life.
Yeah, logistically, it's more of a nightmare than just putting them on life without parole.
And here's the thing: as a society, we can't just put a shell in a 12 gauge and do it that way, because then we're no better than the guy that committed the crime.
Yeah, the same way that we have our right to bear arms, we also have the 8th Amendment, which is in the Bill of Rights, to not have any cruel or unusual punishment. And so the same way we have to have standards, we can't just go out and act as if we're criminals ourselves. If we're going to have punishments, we have to make sure that they are, as humane as they can be, right, according to our Constitution. And I'm a big constitutionalist, and I think every amendment matters the same as the next, and so that's where it just becomes tricky. I think there are more humane ways for the death penalty. I think with lethal injection, it tends to be zero pain and pretty quick. There are some ways that were deemed to be inhumane, and most states have got rid of them, like firing squad. I think there's
firing squad is my favorite one. I think that if you're on death row because you killed somebody's family member, I think that every person from the victim's family that wants to be a part of it should be one person in the firing squad, and each one of them should be able to pull the trigger.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's only like maybe a couple of states that even allow firing squad nowadays. I think most of them do lethal injection. There's only a few that have some of these like old school ways.
I feel like lethal injection is more. I think that lethal injection is worse than firing squad, because if you hear about all these people that have had the lethal injection, they do some weird stuff before they finally die. Where like if you have a firing squad, one bullet, if it meets your brain, you're gonna die
meet your
instantly.
creator.
Right. I mean, that's just my opinion. I think firing squad is a faster death than the injection, but like that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I gotcha. But I mean, that's our first episode, man. That's pretty crazy.
That was Tied Up in Tallapoosa, and we hope that you guys enjoyed the way that we told that story and the way that we delivered it to you all. I personally want to thank everybody that has showed us so much love on TikTok, and we are so excited. We are so excited and grateful that you guys gave us the time of day to listen to our podcast.
Yeah, so like Hunter said, again, thank you all so much for being a part of this journey that we're trying to start. Obviously, we're here at the beginning. It's episode 1. But like he mentioned, we're having a lot of love shown to us on social media already, which is a good sign. It means you guys are rocking with us and we're rocking with you guys. So if you have any suggestions for any cases, feel free to get on our social medias. You can follow us on Instagram at Crime Daddies Pod. And then from there, you can find all of our other social medias, personal and for the podcast as well. So again, thank you so much for being a part of this. And thanks for listening to our first episode. We will be back every Tuesday with a new episode. And next week, I'll be bringing a case for Hunter to hear. So look out for that one. And again, thanks for listening to Crime Daddies.
And again, happy birthday, Angela Campbell. Thank you so much.
Happy birthday, Angela. You guys have a good one, and we'll see you next week.